Hello everyone, welcome to the Crash MotoGP podcast. And yeah, there's no racing again for MotoGP this weekend. We have to wait another week, but there's still plenty to talk about in terms of off-track business. We'll just get straight into it. I'm joined, of course, by Pete McLaren and Rob Jones. Pete, you had a very interesting chat in a small group with Pit Beirer last week. Plenty to come from that, wasn't there? There's obviously the discussions with the new signings with Marc Vinales and Enea Bastianini. But you posed a good question to him around the signing that maybe could have been a Jorge Martin or a Marc Marquez. What was the vibe that you got from KTM, just in general, from that chat?
Yeah, so this was, as you say, this was Pitt speaking directly to the media in the aftermath of this double announcement, wasn't it, that came out. We sort of expected Bastianini, but then the surprise news about Vinales, and of course that means that Jack Miller's leaving and Augusto Fernandez. So this was all to do with this kind of thing, and KTM wanted to speak directly and sort of put it out there. And then, as Pitt said at the end, he hopes he won't have to bring it up again. But for the rest of this season, because obviously there's still a lot of this year to go. But anyway, so yeah, we went into detail on, as you say, on a lot of topics really about the signings and about next year, riders, the brand changes at Tectoire, etc., etc. So and the question about Marc and Martin came up because, as they were saying, they've now got the guys that are just below them in the World Championship, below the top three. They've got Bastianini, who's fourth, and Acosta's fifth, etc., etc. Maverick in sixth. They'll all be on KTM's. So it was, and Pitt made clear their target is to get into that top three. So the sort of natural question is, so did you speak to the guys who are in that top three now? Because of course two of them were available until just a few days ago. And he sidestepped it a bit, but he basically play down the chance of any serious talks there. And it was quite interesting also, wasn't it, that he also spoke about the difference between a rider speaking to you that's maybe trying to work on a better offer from another team and a rider that really wants to join you. And he made clear, didn't he, that Maverick, he was sure that Maverick was just, I want to join you. And there was no back and forth. I think he said with his words, it wasn't going, I want this, you want that. It was just, they did the deal really quickly. And that kind of also convinced KTM that, yeah, he really wants to be with us. He's not trying to get an offer that he can then go and take to another team and say, oh, look, KTM are offering me this. What will you give me? No, this was just, I want to ride for you. Let's get the deal done. And that seems to be what happened.
Yeah, and thanks to KTM, we'll actually play the clip now of Pitt talking. So here it is.
Hi there, Pitt. You mentioned the goal to sort of take on those top three guys in the championship, break into that title fight. I mean, did you speak with guys like Marc and Jorge Martin as well? And, what specific things do you think that Maverick and Enea will bring to the project?
Since I know Marc and Jorge, we speak sometimes, but we were never really in a contract conversation because they were just committed to their ideas and program. So we went quite early another path to get really our package as strong as possible. And if you have like riders on the level of Maverick, I mean, he won in America, and then what Enea did in Mugello, you see the quality of these guys. And I feel on a really, really good day, I feel we could win. It's missing since a while. And then I would say on another good day, definitely we are maybe the second force behind Ducati. I say also on a good day, because on another day, Aprilia is stronger than us. I don't want, and they do also a great job, but we are not fully there. We need to make another step on the bike, in the team, to get really competitive, to beat the leading guys. And so that's why I think Enea and Maverick, they can bring something to the project. I feel Brad, for example, he's so long with us that it's very difficult for him and for us to change direction out of that, what we are doing together since such a long time. So I think it's really, then you have also Pedro, who is a rookie, looks like he likes our package. He can go fast immediately, but I feel we need some input from winning riders to give us also another touch. I feel it's everything there. We just need to put the right things together, make the package stronger, and the target is the three guys in front of us. That's clear on that list.
Very interesting that. Rob, you think about the many things that were brought up in this. The gas thing is a question that was asked too. What are your takes on it, Rob? Do you think it's a shift from KTM? I said to Pete last week that maybe they don't want their first World Championship MotoGP. Potentially, it still could be, of course, that Pedro Acosta wins it on a gas. That would kind of be a real hit to the brand of KTM, wouldn't it? It's a logical choice, isn't it, for them to solidify it as a four bike factory, isn't it, for KTM?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we spoke about it even on the latest podcast, the fact that, we made the point with Ducati, not wanting the number one to be in a satellite team, or even worse, to go to another manufacturer. And I think for KTM, who have in the last few years risen so much to the point where they're probably thinking to themselves, right, we're pretty much putting the bike that's good enough to win the championship on the table. Now we need the lineup, we need the riders. They've gone and, to Pete's point, they've gone and sorted that out with getting Acosta from Moto 2. Now an unbelievable team of Bastianini and Vinales, two riders who probably weren't in their realm of thinking a few weeks ago. So now their actual four-rider lineup is one of the best on the grid. So they've solidified that. They've solidified the team as basically an all-in. This is like us as KTM. It's four equal riders, four equal bikes, one project, and this is the way we're going to go forward. And basically, it's an extension and like a big assault on trying to win the MotoGP title. I think it makes sense for a lot of reasons. It makes sense just more than anything for KTM to not only because of who they are and the way they've risen in MotoGP, but to have four riders this close in terms of talent. I mean, we've seen Acosta this year. We've seen Vinales on his day. He's unbeatable. Binder is a brilliant Sunday racer. Bastianini can win races. So they've got riders, all four of them have different skill sets, but a number one riders essentially on the right bike. So I think for KTM, it's a case of they wanted to show all their riders that and make that image sort of public and show that off. So I think it's a big move.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely that. And as we've mentioned, Pete, in our last podcast, losing Jack Miller, did you get a sense from Pitt that he said he was quite sad to see they were losing Jack in that, but could you get a sense from him that was sincere? Really, it seemed that way from his words.
It did, and he did pay credit to the contribution that Miller's made, didn't he? So he didn't try and downplay what Jack has done for KTM. Made clear that he's brought something new to the bike. The setup and all these things, all these ideas he's brought with him, and his crew chief from Ducati. That's helped improve the bike, improve the project. Ironically, it's probably helped the other riders, the other KTM riders, it seems, more than Jack. So Jack's work seems to have sort of benefited others maybe more than him. And but yeah, I think you got the impression it just came down basically to results and to the number of wins. Even you got Vinales is a 10-time MotoGP winner on 3 different bikes. He becomes available. We assume the Bastianini deal was already done, so that left only 1 seat left. And yeah, I think things happened very quickly after Mugello, as they said. As soon as that Ducati deal fell into place, and then obviously the Martin deal at the same time, and everything else for Aprilia, then they suddenly Vinales becomes available. The deal is done, and yeah, unfortunately Jack's left without a place. So let's see where he goes. Yeah, I mean, Pitt made clear, look, we want Jack to do well with us this year. It'll be a win-win if we can get Jack back up, because it'll help his prospects of staying in MotoGP next year as well. So that's their focus. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that you can't rider deals, that they're always going to end someday, aren't they? But I think, yeah, definitely Jack's made clear he wanted to stay longer. We haven't heard from Jack, have we? Of course, because he's since Mugello, all this has happened since the Mugello test. So we'll see what he says when he arrives at Assen on the Thursday. What his sort of view is and what his options are for the future.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear what Jack's going to say. He won't really sugarcoat anything. He'll just kind of say it as it is. But I kind of do feel a bit for him. It's kind of, it's in this situation again. But I think he will stay. What do you think, Rob? Do you think he does have other options? But it's where, isn't it now? It's like you're kind of left with just, I don't want to say the worst options, but he has a couple of things that could suit him, isn't he?
Yeah, I think for Miller, it's difficult because for me, I keep linking him with that factory seat at Honda. I think he's got experience, albeit on a very old Honda in the past. He's been a factory rider, at so many different brands, and we know he can still be fast. So I think, especially if Honda do go on to lose Joan Mir to another brand or to retirement. I think that would be a logical step as someone who's got a lot of MotoGP experience, but valuable experience, and is a race winner. And I think that would be, we forget he's won more races than Joan Mir, and Joan Mir is a world champion in MotoGP. So Miller does have the credentials and that the results to back up being a factory rider still. It's whether anyone's going to give him that opportunity, because I think the results last year weren't great, but there was potential on the KTM. This year has been a bit of a disaster, I think we've got to say, for Miller. If we're looking at it from all their riders, Binder hasn't been that strong, and it's been worse. It's been made worse, I guess, because of Acosta's form. But Miller has really stood out in the wrong way as going backwards. So I think he will stay. There will be an opportunity. There's that World Superbike potential that's lingering. It's one of those for Miller. It would probably be seen as a big step down. It would be a big coup for the World Superbike Championship if they got a Jack Miller. And obviously we don't know what might happen with Bautista. The factory Ducati seat in World Superbike could be something that becomes available, and a deal there could happen even. I think ultimately he'll stay. It's trying to piece where he's going to go, because, you could say, oh, the factory rider at Aprilia, but I think we kind of know that that's going to go to someone like Marco Bezzecchi. They want an Italian rider. So there's each team, when you look at it, has a reason to maybe not go for Jack Miller because of another situation. So I think for Miller, number one objective is to just stay in MotoGP wherever that is. I think it'll be difficult, but I think he'll find a way in somewhere.
Yeah, and like I say, Jack has a lot of support as well, and I think teams take that into consideration. He's a well-liked character in MotoGP. Fans like him. He's got that Australian factor too. Fans from that side of the world, they want to keep eyes on a championship, and this does come into it also. I think Jack Miller will stay in MotoGP, but I don't know where yet. Like you mentioned, Rob, good segue from Marco Bezzecchi and Aprilia. I've seen a few reports from the Italian outlets, multiple, saying that it appears that Aprilia, that's their target, and they want to try and sign him, and the announcement might come as early as this week or next week. What do you think of that? We discussed the options at length. Who could we be? Who could it be? Would it be an Italian? Would it be a Trackhouse rider? But if they go for Marco Bezzecchi, and there's links there in the past, they tried to sign him before, of course, it would make sense, wouldn't it, from Mervola's comments of always wanting an Italian rider for their brand.
Yeah, it would absolutely, and I think if you're Bezzecchi as well, I think you grab it with both hands. I mean, that's a great ride, isn't it? It's not just a factory seat, which we know he wanted or he wants. It's a competitive factory seat as well. I mean, look at what Aleix and Maverick have done on that bike. The number of wins it's had more wins than KTM, hasn't it, in recent years? Which, as Pitt said, it's been a long time since KTM have won, and they're getting, I think, a little bit impatient about that because they believe on their day that they're good enough. But Pitt did also pay tribute to Aprilia, didn't he, and say how strong they are, and make clear that they're a big rival as well. So so in Bezzecchi's case, that's a great seat to get, and I think it would be a no. You grab it with both hands if you're Bezzecchi, and as you say, from Aprilia's side, it gives them that Italian rider, a young guy. Great combination, really, of Bezzecchi and Martin, two young chargers. I suppose the only question mark then is maybe the experience side, the development of the bike side.
Correct.
Let's see how they adapt to that. But as you've also said, there's still the Trackhouse seat, so they can also put someone experienced there, or they've already got some experienced guys there. So I think it would make sense. We know that Bastianini was sort of in the frame at Aprilia at the start, wasn't he? He was the big name being rumoured, and then Bezzecchi's name started to come in. Aleix dropping it himself, of course, into the conversation, and really, it's, of course, with Martin moving, it's just the odds on that have just shot up. So I think as far as an expected move, I think that would be the next one.
Yeah, Rob, what's your take on it? It's a risk, like Pete said, isn't it? If they were beside Bezzecchi and have Martin, there's two riders that haven't touched an Aprilia before in the factory setup, which is quite a bold move from Aprilia, but it's one that obviously they think it will work if they pull it off.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also this is where Aprilia are probably really regretting not having Aleix as a potential test rider. If they if they sign Bezzecchi to go alongside Martin, having someone like Espargaro and then Lorenzo Savadori as a test team would be very, very good. Obviously, that's not going to happen now. I think for Aprilia, they're just looking at it as a situation where they're getting two of the youngest best MotoGP riders to put on their bike, which I think fundamentally they probably believe, yes, experience is good to have, but someone like Martin will make any bike work if it's fast. And then Bezzecchi, we've seen his potential. I think it's a very good move for Aprilia. It's, in my opinion, an absolute no-brainer for Bezzecchi. We've seen what rejecting a better seat or a full factory bike has cost him, and it's, you know, his form. We talked about Miller's form. Bezzecchi's form this year, trying to adapt to that GP23, has just fallen off a cliff. And I think for Bezzecchi, not lucky to get this potential opening, but it's maybe one that, you know, if Vinales had stayed, we'd be looking at it like, where is Bezzecchi's opening as a factory rider? So I think it's one that is going to come about. Like you said, you've both said it's a deal that's going to get signed. And I think for Bezzecchi, it's a no-brainer. It's a chance to move on to another Italian branded bike, a very competitive bike. And I think it's one that makes sense. Obviously, like Pete said, they can maneuver someone around in the track house potentially who's got experience with that bike. And that team, again, like a lot of the satellite teams, at least has one full factory bike. They might have two going forward. We don't know. So I think for Aprilia, it's more than anything, it's a big show of intent, you know, to go and get Martin after the links to Bastianini. And Bastianini would have been a great rider for Aprilia, or a big name, but they were like, no, Martin's available. We're going to go for the absolute top that we can get. And then to fill Bezzecchi in next to him, I think is a very, very good lineup, and one that, if the bike is good enough, will challenge Ducati's factory team going forward.
Yeah, I think it's a logical move, and like I say, nothing is official yet, but the talk is that that is their target, and I would imagine when you read all this, and there's multiple sources in Italy saying it, I'd say that it's going to potentially be their number one target, and it'll happen. So yeah, that looks good for Aprilia. I want to talk about MotoGP in general. As you go to Silverstone, it's a 75th anniversary. We're getting, for the first time, really unprecedented, isn't it, Pete? Every rider, it appears, it says from the press release, every team will have tribute retro liveries from the past of the manufacturers, which is very cool, isn't it? It's going to be a headache for people trying to work out who's who. But yeah, what's your take on it? It's something I think MotoGP's needed to do for a long time, just to make it look different for a weekend.
Exactly, yeah. For a weekend, it's going to be it's a great move, isn't it? It's going to make the event stand out. And Silverstone is, of course, an historic track. It wasn't on the original calendar, was it? But the Isle of Man was. That was the first race, wasn't it? In 1949. So
1949,
so you know,
yeah.
it's the UK anyway. It's not quite the same track, but it's the UK, and obviously Silverstone is a historic track. So if you're going to do it somewhere, then I guess you know, why not Silverstone? It'll bring something to the event. We know that Silverstone, the crowd numbers haven't been great in the past few years. So anything that can help create a bit more of a buzz around it. I think the attendance will be up this year anyway, with the, you know, Marquez back on the Ducati, the battle that's going on at the front. So this will just add another factor in that, and another level of interest. And yet, none of these liveries have been revealed, have they? So they're all going to be. I think it's only the Thursday of the race weekend when they'll actually pull the covers off. So until then, yeah, we don't know quite what each of them will be running. I think, yeah, they can basically pick any kind of retro livery they like, can't they? So some might. Obviously, the factories that have been in racing for a long time might literally replicate something that they've run decades ago, whereas the newer satellite teams might just do a retro feel to the livery that they've got now. So we'll have to wait and see. But everyone pretty much loves a special livery, don't they? Anyway, and we're going to have the whole grid on them. So
yeah,
what's not to like?
Yeah, I keep seeing, obviously they done the teaser and they kind of released little like liveries of each manufacturer, and I was kind of piecing them together. You know, you've got a load in there. You're like, wow, if they pull these off, they're gonna look so cool. Like, for example, the Aprilia ones are like the old MS Aprilia sort of 2004 era where they had the 250s and everything. They all looked like that, and it was just. Yeah, it was like the white and the silver with the black. It looks so cool. Even Ducati's one, it's like, is that a sort of look at their first MotoGP bike? With you look at, like, I'll put a picture on screen now for our listeners and our viewers. It's like they're kind of like a Marlboro kind of look to it, but obviously they can't put cigarette sponsors on that anymore, because, and of course you've got other sponsors too involved now who want to have their place on the livery. But yeah, there's so much potential, and I think, Rob, what do you think about it? You know, it's going to probably, like you say, it's really nostalgia, isn't it? It's going to bring a lot of people just to, like Pete says, to the Grand Prix just to see a different looking bike.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, to Pete's point, it's the perfect venue to do it. And I think something that's important to say is a bit like with the F1 at Silverstone, the British crowd, and in most sports, are a very passionate and hardcore like fan base. And I think for having it at Silverstone, you're going to get a lot of hardcore fans who will know their history, will know the sport, know liveries, know what the teams and what those liveries back in those moments in times, what they meant. And I think for those people going to the track and being able to see that and see teams sort of demonstrate some history and put bikes on show that are going to have, you know, beautiful liveries. I think it's something that's going to be very, very welcome. I think it's going to get MotoGP even more in touch with their fans, which is something that you should always try to do. We've seen it with F1, how the job they've done, and I think for MotoGP to do that and to bring the fans as close as possible is a win-win for them. And I think it's going to be a great weekend because Silverstone always produces great racing. But I think to not know and to not be able to pick out any of the 22 riders because we don't know what bikes, you know, what colours they're wearing is going to be tricky, but it's going to be a great weekend, I think.
The only one I'm a bit sort of like, well, what's your livery going to be as Trackhouse? I'm like, you don't really, you have your own livery now. I'm like, you're going to pick like a sort of retro throwback. I know they had that Nicky Hayden tribute at their very first launch. That it was just an American flag on the bike. So maybe they're going to do something like that. But Pete, what would you like to see if you could pick a team and a livery? What livery would you like to see make a return?
Ooh, so many. I mean, the issue is, as you mentioned earlier, the tobacco sponsorship, isn't it? Because all that you think of the Marlboro Yamahas, and you think of you know, the Rothmans Hondas, and all those kind of things. So yeah, maybe a modern take, obviously without the tobacco, on those kind of classic liveries. I think it'd be good to see those distinctive ones, those ones you instantly look at, you know, and sort of knew which bike they were. How someone might sort of interpret that without the tobacco branding. I think that would be good.
Rob, what about you? What would you like to see on a bike? What would you like to see return? Maybe a throwback Repsol? I don't know. What would you be your pick?
There's a few actually. One from not that long ago. It was sort of a bit like the Toro Rosso colours for the Tech 3 team. You know, the blue and orange when they were Tech 3 Red Bull. So I think that would be one. This is where I'm gutted that Suzuki aren't in MotoGP anymore. And obviously the cigarettes are a factor because the Rizzler livery, the light blue, was beautiful. That was one of my favourites. I think for Ducati as well, the year I think it was when Danilo Petrucci won, the sort of like the Bumblebee yellow and black. I thought that was really nice. That was a really cool livery. Obviously that was a bit more like Mugello orientated, but I think Tech 3 are probably going to be, in my eyes, the team to watch because they sort of have changed their livery every year. So I think they've got a lot that they could choose. Obviously, Repsol, their liveries from a few years ago when they had a bit more black on the bike was something I really enjoyed. So I think Repsol could do something really special with theirs as well.
Yeah, well, my favourites, well, I hope they deliver on it. I think from the teaser, Yamaha have just got to bring out the iconic yellow and black and the red and white. I know if Alex Rins and Quadraro were both running them, that's a 10 out of 10 from me. You know,
the
we've
red
seen
and white would be really nice.
Yeah,
really
the last time we seen that, I think it was Ben Spies and Lorenzo might have ran it, I think 2011. I think Ben Spies won around Assen on a white and red bike as well. So yeah, and you know, obviously the link with Valentino Rossi 2005, they ran the iconic colours at Laguna Seca and Valencia, so I think it's a no-brainer for Yamaha. Just do it, and I think that'll be it. Gresini will probably end up running there. I think they do that tribute livery every year at Misano. I think that'll probably be a continuation, so Marquez is going to look very good in those colours. Yeah, a great initiative. I'm just a bit gutted it's not across all classes, because you could just, I don't know, it'd be a bit too much chaos if I think everyone changed their livery. But yeah, something to look forward to for MotoGP at Silverstone, something different. And at least we can say there's going to be no special livery curses because everyone's going to be in them. So if you have a bad weekend, you have a bad weekend. There's no curse involved. That's not an excuse. So yeah, MotoGP in 2027, there's a big rule change. BMW have mentioned that potentially they want to do it, Rob. Toprak Razgatlioglu at the weekend done a hat-trick of wins at Misano. Surely this is just leading into everything now, where it seems that the conversations are getting louder and they will want to have him in some capacity, maybe in a MotoGP project. Do you see that being possible for 27, or could you see him in MotoGP even earlier than that?
I mean, for me, the where he is now and that sort of trajectory that BMW are on, it would make sense. And I think, what he did at the weekend, Ducati's sort of home turf, and Pete was covering the event. It was truly special to watch the dominance he had and the way he's adapted to that BMW. Yes, I think we all believe that bike is a very good bike and it has finally made those steps to being one of the top bikes. But you still look at the other BMW riders and they just can't get close to what Toprak's doing. I think for Toprak, he keeps sort of alluding that he's maybe got an option to get out of the contract and go to MotoGP, or if someone comes in for him, he'll listen. But I think what he's doing right now with BMW, if they come into the sport in 2027, which they seem quite intent on doing, if Toprak stays within World Superbike, that could be another 3 World Championships by then. He could be coming into MotoGP as a 4-time Superbike champion. Not a million miles off Jonathan Rea in terms of statistics. He's already moving up the ranks in terms of wins. So I think for Toprak, there's a lot. Obviously, age always comes into it when you're factoring in MotoGP teams. But I think what helps him in this situation is it's not going to a settled MotoGP brand. BMW coming in themselves, they might want to go and get someone with MotoGP experience to put on the second bike, but then I think for them to bring Toprak over, especially if he's won championships with them, that would kind of be that reward in a way. Obviously, you can't give MotoGP rides out for just rewards and success, but I think what he's achieving, and we know he's got the talent on the right bike, Toprak in MotoGP. I mean, we probably all think that Marc Marquez and Pedro Acosta is spectacular to watch on a MotoGP bike. I'm intrigued, but also worried as to what Toprak would look like on one. But I think what he's doing right now, him coming into MotoGP, it would be a massive shame if he never joins MotoGP. That is what I will say. But I think the what he's doing at BMW right now, they're intent on coming to MotoGP. I think staying where he is right now, and then 2027 being the year, it would be perfect for him and for BMW themselves.
Yeah, as Rob said, Pete, you covered the weekend. What did you think of Toprak? He's pretty special, isn't he? It's like, I think he took over Nori Haga's record tally of wins in World Superbike. So when you're overtaking that level of rider, for how long he's only been in the championship for, and the success he's had, he's pretty incredible to watch, isn't he?
He is, yeah, and for me it was echoes really of Rossi's first year at Yamaha. Someone coming into a bike that's not really rated and immediately being competitive on it, and 3 wins. I mean, at Ducati's home round, as Rob said. I mean, what a performance! And it'd be a great shame if he didn't go to MotoGP. Rob said it all about the BMW link. I suppose if you're just going to do a what if and say, well, where might he go if he did go next year? There's the Pramac Ducati seat that's free if you're looking for competitive rides. We know Keenan said that it would be a factory seat, doesn't it? He wants Toprak, if he does go to a factory. Well, then you're looking at teams like Repsol Honda, aren't you? Now, if you were Repsol Honda, from their point of view, I have to say, I think you'd snap Toprak. If you had any chance of getting Toprak, I mean, the perfect guy. He's shown that he can work with a bike. He's not afraid to take on a project where the bike is not the best and make it work. And especially if he coming across with Phil Marr and his crew chief, those two guys, ideal for Honda's situation. Maybe not ideal for Toprak and being competitive straight away, but if you're Honda, I mean, he'd be the dream guy, I think, if Mir was to leave, because he's got the motivation, he's got the talent, he's shown he can ride a bike that isn't the best, and I think if you're in Honda's position, we were speaking about this last week, and who would you get if Mir leaves? And you need someone like that. You need someone that's going to come in hungry and almost with a blank sheet of paper, just, I'm going to ride the bike. They've got Marini next to him, who's the analytical guy, the guy to do all the feedback, the technical stuff, can tell them what the Honda's doing compared to the Ducati, etc., etc. Then you've got the other guy you need, who's just going to grab it and just ride the wheels off it. So, yeah, I mean, imagine if that was to happen. I mean, if you were Honda, like I say, I'd give him a blank check, to be quite honest, and say whatever you want. But I think the BMW, to stay with them and all the rumours about the future. The only thing is, if Toprak does win the championship this year straight away, does he need to win again and again? That might be the only thing. I mean, it would be such a huge achievement, wouldn't it, to do that this year in his first year, another world championship. It would almost be okay. Now move on to something else. But it's as you guys are saying, that the rule change is a few years away, so BMW are not going to be there for a couple of years. So what happens then? What happens in that stopgap in between? So yeah, interesting question, because I think Toprak is so far ahead of people's expectations at this stage, isn't he, on the BMW, that suddenly all this talk of the future and MotoGP and BMW, maybe all that has to be sort of fast-tracked a bit, and the timescale is shrinking because he's just so far ahead of where people thought he would be now.
And one thing that, if I could just add on that, to Pete's point, if he went to Honda, I think what can actually work in his advantage is it's a new bike and he's got no reference, no previous experience. It's not like he's in Marini's shoes coming from a great MotoGP bike to the worst bike on the grid. So for Toprak, that bike, even though it's not a rated bike at the moment, that might just work for him because he's got no reference, he's got no previous experience, and it could just, his initial feeling, although it might not be, if it was another rider with MotoGP experience, it might not be what they're looking for. It might be what he was looking for because he's, he knows no different. So I think for Toprak, going anywhere, obviously, Pete made it another great point. If BMW say to Toprak, we are coming in 2 years' time, but you need to go now. You've won the World Championship with us in Superbikes. You just go, but we would like to join up in MotoGP. That's where satellite team, and I guess for Toprak is convincing Keenan, Razgatlioglu, that taking a 1 year at a satellite team is a good idea. But that's where Pramac Ducati, to then go back to BMW when they come into the sport, something like that. But obviously that's a lot of ifs and buts and contracts and agreements that would need to be in place over a few years. But I think it's very relevant points. And the Honda thing, why not from Honda's perspective?
Yeah. For me, it's a risk if he did try it, say, next year. It's just when you think about it, it's like you're at the front of World Superbike, you're the face of BMW, you're winning. Then say, yeah, it's great, you get the MotoGP ride, but then you get handed the Honda and you're like, right, I have to get to work on this. You're not getting really any TV time. You're having to really push yourself physically because we know the Honda is an absolute beast to ride. It just wants to throw you off at every opportunity. I don't know. It's a real risk for me. I think the best option I could see Toprak doing, and maybe from what they say on World Superbike, he likes the environment that they have there. It's a bit more chilled out. He can, like you say, the calendar's much shorter, bigger gaps in between. He can go back home and he does all sorts of stuff we see on Instagram. It's hilarious. So it is. I don't know if he could do that as a MotoGP rider. Maybe he could, but I think staying with BMW and trying to progress that project, and you can imagine he's getting paid a big whack by them as well to be their lead rider for that project too, for their Superbike. So yeah, I'd like to see him stay a few more years on World Superbike. If he wins the world title this year, Pete, go ahead.
You just remind me one small thing there. Interesting, isn't it? Honda got concessions, haven't they? So if he did go to a Japanese factory team, potentially he could do loads of private testing. Yeah. So all those times that you now see him, as you mentioned there, Jordan, out on track training and doing all this crazy stuff with the other guys and Keenan and everything else, he could be doing a test on a Honda in somewhere like Barcelona, somewhere that's near an airport, not hard. Every time you get a weekend off, if something like that was to be put together, if Honda threw the kitchen sink at it and went, look, we will give you all of these private tests. So we got all of these concessions. You can ride the bike. Maybe that would help him adapt as well. But as we say, this is all just what ifs at the moment. But yeah, undoubtedly, massively talented rider. And I think we could all agree we want to see him try MotoGP at some stage.
Yeah, that's sort of like he has tried MotoGP bikes in a private test. He tried it, was it 2 years ago now, in the Yamaha, where it didn't really go to plan. He had an Aragon test, I think, on a Jerez test. And it was kind of, the weather was a bit iffy and he didn't really feel comfortable, as he said. He didn't really feel like the bike was really his. But he said he enjoyed the opportunity, but yeah, I would like to see, like you say, Pete, him given a full program, essentially just to go out and just learn it. Yeah, who knows? But Toprak is an absolute, yeah, he's a hero in World Superbike, and I love watching him every weekend. It's just a shame we don't get to see more World Superbikes because he is just box office to watch, and I think BMW have struck gold there with him. Who knows for their MotoGP project if they do come in the future. But we did talk about off camera last week a biggest what if. Now I've got a few wrote down here and we could maybe discuss them. So the first one that I have in terms of a big MotoGP what if Casey Stoner didn't retire at the end of 2012? Pete, what would happen then with Repsol Honda? Would Marc Marquez and Casey Stoner have this massive rivalry? Would Danny Pedrosa be even on their program setup? What would have happened then?
that's probably the biggest what if, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, in recent MotoGP history, yeah. So if Casey didn't retire, then Marc would have come alongside him, wouldn't he, in the Repsol Honda team for 2013. So Marquez would still have been a Repsol Honda rider, but Danny would have been out, wouldn't he? And then there's another whole what if, because Danny wouldn't have retired then, would he? Because he raced on for another 5-6 years.
Yep.
A lot of people say even now, what if Danny had raced another bike that wasn't the Honda? Of course, especially given that here we are 12 years later and he's still quick enough to be on a podium or top 3 in MotoGP on a KTM. So what might Danny have done on another bike, if he had have made that move then? But yeah, I mean, the biggest one there is that if that had happened, we would have got that showdown, if you like, or that crossover between those two phenomenally talented riders, Stoner and Marquez, and seen them and in the same team on the same bike, which at the time, of course, was a front running bike as well, wasn't it? So that would have been that would have been an amazing thing. And as you say, it all leads on from that. Then what would happen with Danny? Where would he have gone? What might his career have done? And everything else.
Rob, what do you think? If you had to have Marquez and Stoner in the same garage, it would have been absolute fireworks, I reckon.
It would have. I don't think it would have worked. I think that those two. I mean, we're going to struggle to have Marc Marquez and Bagnaia work next season, but Stoner and Marquez would have just been, because, like Pete said, that bike was ready to win at that point. Obviously, Stoner had just won the championship in 2011, and then as soon as Marc joined MotoGP, he won. 6 out of his 7 titles in 7 years. So
yeah,
we would have got 2 of the best ever with 2 of the best riding styles ever going against each other on the best bike on the grid. It would have been fireworks. The fact that there was those rumours a few years ago that Marc didn't even want Stoner as a test rider because he was maybe worried about Stoner's pace and who Stoner was. So having them as teammates, I'm pretty convinced that neither of them would have won the title, and a Yamaha rider would have won it, because there would have been too
Lorenzo
much drama.
would have won it.
Lorenzo would have just sneaked in, got another world title. Stoner and Marc would have been Ocon and Gasly of this year in Formula One. Just contact, costing each other points. It would have been, a nightmare for Honda, absolute box office for us. A shame we never got to see that. Oh, and not even that. Having Marc and Stoner in the same team, it would have been the ideal thing that we could have ever wished for. But just having Stoner and Marc Marquez in MotoGP for 1 year on competitive bikes would have also been great, I think.
Yeah, because you always see it. So people say, Ben Spee says, the fastest ever rider's ever seen is Casey Stoner, but the most talented is Marc Marquez. And he's like, when you just hear that sort of prospect, you're like, oh, why? For 1 year, could you have not just set them on track together? It would have been absolutely amazing. But yeah, another one I have wrote down is like, what if Jorge Lorenzo had stayed with Ducati instead of moving to Honda at the end of 2018? It's a big one, Pete, isn't it? Because when you think about it, when he announced when he was leaving, he just started winning. And he looked great, and it was just a small fix, wasn't it, with the bike? It was the fuel tank position, like a extra bit of padding that really helped him, didn't it, with that GP, was it 18 then?
Yeah, that was sort of the final key, wasn't it? Yeah, he struggled during that first year, hadn't he? 2017, Dovi had sort of outdone him, which people didn't really expect, but Dovi really rose and took on Marc, didn't he? Took it down to the final round, and that sort of continued in 2018, and so there was all this coming into Mugello. Lorenzo was still struggling. There was people pretty much knew that they were going to move Petrucci up, weren't they? They made clear Lorenzo was being paid a huge amount of money at the time, and it just wasn't working. And so you could kind of understand it. But then, just as at the same time, but in the background, Lorenzo is doing this deal with Repsol Honda. Just as he sort of completes that deal, suddenly everything falls into place for him, and he gets 3 wins in the middle of that season.
Yeah,
and really unbelievable. Just front running form, and he got injured, didn't he, towards the end of the year, and that sort of ended any chance of sort of fighting for the championship or anything else. But definitely, you could make a case that he would have gone on to become potentially Ducati's first champion since Stoner, because if he'd have carried on that momentum that he got, that level that he reached with the bike, when he seemed to work out the braking, wasn't it? He seemed to understand how to get the hard braking from the Ducati. He really had to adapt, completely change his style, didn't he? But I think it just does show that you need more than 1 year on a new bike, doesn't it? We see that time and time again that, Di Antonio, his second year makes a big step, and that's why riders they're also cautious about changing from teams. We've been speaking, haven't we, about 2 new guys at Aprilia and everything else. It can take until the second year for guys to really understand a different bike, and you just don't know. Some people jump straight on it and it works for them. Other people it takes longer, but when it clicks, and it definitely clicked for Lorenzo in the middle of that year. But just as it happens, the deal with Repsol Honda is already done, which again puts Pedrosa into retirement, doesn't it? And then
Danny Pedrosa is linked to everything here, isn't he?
The knock-on from that was that Petronas were waiting for Pedrosa to make a decision on retirement, and then Quartararo wouldn't have had the ride because the plan was for Pedrosa and Morbidelli. It
all links into each other, doesn't it?
Yeah. Danny's is at the center of everything, isn't it? So yeah, but no, yeah, it just it's another all these things, and just one decision can have big implications. But we'll never know what Lorenzo might have done. But there's no doubt that before he got on the Ducati, it was much more of a beast, wasn't it? It was much more wild to ride, and he was part of that process of making the bike competitive at every track, wasn't he? It took a while, as we say, and I think a lot of people sort of lost belief that he was going to get there, but he did show that he could get there in the end. And the Ducati, visually, the way it handled looked a lot different by the time he left the bike than when he got on it at the start of 2017. So although results-wise it wasn't a great success, he did win those races, and I think the process of adapting the bike for a Lorenzo type style, it now runs on now, doesn't it? If Lorenzo got on the bike now, you just think that would be perfectly suited to him, wouldn't it? The Ducati. It's but yeah, it was just at the early stage of that, wasn't he? But who knows? Yeah, but amazing that all those things happened. And it was Mugello again, wasn't it? Where all this happened. Here we are all these years later, and these big moves happen at Mugello with Mark and Jorge Martin. So Mugello is the place where big things happen, rider-wise.
It's just incredible when you think about it, because, Lorenzo obviously goes in the Repsol Honda, and it's an absolute disaster. And then it's like, if he had stayed with Ducati, does it affect Pecco Bagnaia and that whole generation that came through? Because the switch, when you really hear about it, the Ducati wanted to have was they got rid of Dovi and Lorenzo, and they wanted this younger sort of rider to kind of mould different styles, like you say, Pete. And does that change their project that way then? Does Pecco Bagnaia not really come in and have the same effect that he has? Just incredible. That do you know what? That is the big what if of the last whatever many years. Because like you say, it affects Quartararo. Danny Pedrosa again's involved. Yeah, just I really like that one, actually. That's a really good one. We should have done that whole podcast on that.
You could even add another extension to it, because if Jorge then didn't retire at the end of 2019, of course, we know what happened to Mark. And with Mark out, Lorenzo would have taken on that role as the number one guy at Honda, wouldn't he? And they would have thrown all their resources behind him. And again, it's not saying that everything would have suddenly started working, but you can kind of imagine that perhaps, a bit like with the Ducati, it might have started to become a more rider-friendly bike, if they were just focusing on a Lorenzo-type riding style and knowing or having one clear leader there. But of course, he'd retired. He was due to ride that bike, wasn't he? Of course, he finished a year early. He had a 2-year contract. So he should have been on the Repsol Honda in 2020, but after such a nightmare, as you say, in 2019, he finished at the end of that year. And so, we didn't get to see him have that second year when he would have been, as we now know, basically the undisputed number one at Honda.
Unbelievable. And that's my last one for you, Rob. I have here, what if Marc Marquez just had of Christ the first one, the save that he had at Jerez 2020, the first one when he was leading? What if he had just Christ then and he didn't have to do that comeback, wouldn't have got injured? I know it's a big what if, but what happens then for the landscape of MotoGP? I just assume Marquez comes back the next week and wins and wins and wins, and it's just like MotoGP looks completely different for him and Honda, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think to your point, whether he crashed the first time around or then completed the comeback and didn't crash, I think we're looking at Marc Marquez either tied on 7 MotoGP titles with Valentino Rossi or on 8. And have surpassed that.
I think way more, to be honest. I think he would have had at least 11 if he had been fit, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, the pace advantage he had in that Jerez race in my mind, there's no doubt he's winning 2020, and there's probably no doubt he's winning 2021, and then maybe the Honda becomes so bad that in 22 he's competitive and maybe finishes like top 3, top 5 in the championship, but can't actually win it. But I think those 2 seasons, the one that he crashed in 2020 and then 21, because you look at how close it was in 2020, he would have been at the head of that. 2021, obviously Quartararo won the championship, but it wasn't a dominant year by Quartararo. And we already saw Ducati in the second half of that season sort of get on terms with Yamaha, and then in 2022 go and win the title. So I think it's a big what if. It's obviously unknown answers, but I think he would have won more titles for sure. The interesting one, just on the previous one about Lorenzo, and we talked about Bagnaia, how that would have affected him. I mean, would Bagnaia even be in the factory team? Would he even be a 2-time world champion? Because if we look at how much that Ducati has progressed and become the best bike on the grid, Lorenzo, with Marquez getting injured, Lorenzo would have been on the Ducati with all the experience in 2020, 2021. Lorenzo could be a 6-time MotoGP champion had he stayed. So that's another massive what if. How many titles could Lorenzo have won on Ducati because of Marquez's injury as well? There's so many arguments. You could put them all together and think this guy could have won championships, this guy could have won this.
Do you know what? I really enjoy this. I this alternate universe. It's happening out there somewhere. There's some alternate universe where this has all happened, and it's just like, yeah, I could do a whole podcast on this. But yeah, good point, Rob. Actually, about Marquez for 21 as well. But then you say this: if nothing happened to Jerez 2020, does he even end up riding a Gresini? Does he end up going to Ducati? We don't get any of this here, and the redemption, the sort of story, the full circle that it's going right now. Not that I prefer it, but it's a really cool story of how he's came back from injury and how he's just reinvigorated himself again. Yeah.
And does he even go to Ducati if Lorenzo had stayed? Because Lorenzo's the number 1 rider, and then they want a young Italian. Does Marquez even go to Ducati from that perspective as well?
Yeah. Do you know what? See, during the summer break, for our listeners, we'll do a big podcast just on what ifs, because I've got one for Valentino Rossi if he hadn't have left Honda. Who knows what would have happened then? He probably would have won about 40 championships, so he would have. But yeah, thankfully Valentino made it interesting and went to Yamaha. Yeah, guys, that's all for this week. Plenty of chat to discuss there, and yeah, we'll discuss more in the summer break when we have more time. But if you enjoyed this podcast, if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, leave us a review. A big thank you, by the way. We're inside the top 250 on the Apple Sports podcast for the UK, which is pretty incredible. We're actually 130th overall. We're beating some podcasts of like sporting heroes of mine who are doing podcasts, and we're beating them. So that's pretty cool. So it is to see that. Yeah, keep supporting us that way on the YouTube channel as well. Subscribe if you're new. Leave us your biggest what if, and we'll get back round to that in the summer in the comments. And yeah, we'll see you next time.